Hi there, everyone. Here we are monitoring the Atlantic Ocean again. As you know, we had a major Hurricane Florence that hit the Carolinas last month. It's now the month of October. Today is October 7th, 2018. Time is 9:01 Central Time, and we are monitoring yet another tropical threat to the United States. We are still technically around the peak time of tropical activity, so it's not really abnormal to be seeing this. We got two active disturbances right now in the Atlantic. We got Tropical Storm Leslie, which has been churning around for a couple weeks now, and no end in sight just yet. But Tropical Storm Leslie is still going on and looks to be active at least for the next week. What's of more interest is newly named Tropical Storm Michael. This disturbance developed off the Yucatan Peninsula earlier today. Starting as Tropical Depression 14, it has intensified as of the latest intermediate advisory is up to a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. So that's a moderate tropical storm producing heavy rains over the Yucatan area. So yeah, Michael is a little stronger. Heavy rains expected over western Cuba tonight and Monday, and there is a threat to the northeastern Gulf Coast. And you see that it does continue to increase. So here's the latest track, and we are going to be monitoring this and giving you guys some updates over the next several days. You can see this is where Michael is right now. It is expected to kind of go on a northward path. You can see we got tropical storm warnings are in effect for western Cuba and the Yucatan coast. As you can see, it is expected to make a path towards the United States about midweek, making landfall somewhere on the Gulf states. It's looking more and more likely that more specifically it will be in northern Florida, so this is the area like around Tallahassee or something like that. It is expected to intensify further, and it will likely become a hurricane. NHC intensity guidance suggests it will become a hurricane by Tuesday. However, we are going to take a look at some of the intensity guidance and see what the latest is showing. Here's the current model track guidance. You can see models are in pretty good agreement with the evolution of the storm. However, they do vary a little bit with the exact location of eventual landfall. So it's important to keep monitoring the forecast, especially because landfall is a few days away yet. But you can see there is a little bit of a spread in the models tonight in terms of where it does come ashore, but generally it's somewhere in northern Florida. So that's and then of course it does ride up the coast here into Georgia and then into the Carolinas once again. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Here is the tropical storm heat potential. This is a pretty interesting map. You can see these deeper red colors is generally means there's a more favorable environment for tropical cyclone genesis or intensification. You can see Michael is actually in this deeper orange and red area, so that's kind of the reason that this hurricane, or not hurricane, tropical storm is intensifying the way it is now. It has been encountering some shear, but we do have some very warm waters down here, and so thus it is still intensifying. And once that shear does weaken, and it is expected to do so once it gets more northward, more significant intensification is possible. This is the shear tendency map over the last 24 hours. You can see shear is increased up here, but forecast shear is expected to decrease with time. So as Michael does move north, unfortunately, this means that this area is expected to clear out a little bit. And again, that would support an intensifying tropical cyclone. Now, again, how much it intensifies is a little uncertain. How quickly it intensifies is a little uncertain, but there is potential as it does approach land that it could quickly come together. So we will be watching that very, very closely. So again, there's the forecast track. It's important to know that, again, it's a few days away from landfall, so this track is likely to adjust at least a little bit before then. But one thing to know is that there's very high confidence that it is going to make landfall somewhere in the Gulf, very likely in northern Florida if nothing drastically changes. So there's very high confidence that it will be in this general area. But the specific landfall is the confidence on the specific location of landfall is lower right now. Now, impacts are not just going to be limited to Florida. So everybody from Florida up through Georgia and in the Carolinas, all of you guys should be monitoring the situation because the impacts will spread more inland. In terms of wind damage, northern Florida will obviously stand the best chance of damaging winds and storm surge especially, but flooding, rains, and some strong winds would be spreading much farther inland over Georgia and the Carolinas. So you guys should be monitoring this as well. But northern Florida especially, very, very closely monitor this. Right now they are predicting a Category 2 at landfall. We are going to get a complete advisory issued here in just a little bit. So this intensity forecast will probably change by the time you see this video, so be sure to stay tuned for updates. So Category 2 at landfall. Now, very, very important that you don't focus on the exact category at landfall, and that was a big mistake with Florence. Florence made landfall as a Category 1, and obviously the impacts were very drastic. There's a lot of factors that come into play in terms of how severe a tropical cyclone is whenever it does make landfall. And even if it is a Category 2, let's say it does not get into a major Category 3 or 4 or 5 or anything like that, even a Category 2 at landfall, that's still winds of 100 miles an hour sustained with gusts even higher than that. That's still really bad, and if you're in northern Florida, I would not want to be around for that. And again, so even if it makes landfall as a Category 2 or if it's weaker, you still need to take action. You still need to do everything you can to prepare for this hurricane. There will be storm surge. There'll be a lot of inland flooding with the rains, and storm surge is probably the most damaging part of a tropical cyclone, along with the flooding. I don't think they have any rainfall maps yet. Here's some key messages from the National Hurricane Center. Michael is expected to produce heavy rainfall. Michael is forecast to become a hurricane when it reaches the northeastern Gulf Coast by midweek, and the risk of dangerous storm surge, rainfall, and wind impacts continues to increase. In addition, Michael is expected to affect portions of the Florida Gulf Coast that are especially vulnerable to storm surge, regardless of the storm's exact track or intensity. Residents in these areas should monitor the progress of the system and follow any advice given by local officials. So that's very important to know, that I guess the northern part of Florida is very prone to storm surge, so that may make Michael especially dangerous for that area. There are no watches or warnings in effect as of yet. However, I do anticipate a hurricane watch to be issued for northern Florida as early as tomorrow afternoon. If not, probably by tomorrow evening. But hurricane watches are probably going to go up by tomorrow. So begin your preparations now. Keep watching the forecast, and be sure to keep monitoring my YouTube page for the latest information.